Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Chad Reelfs with me. Chad is the owner of Adds Value, the co-founder of Lead Different Coaching Group and Experiences, and he is the author of Focus Growth, Become the Mentor You Wish You Had. And I think one thing you're going to hear in Chad's journey today is when you are focused on the mission, the doors will open and you just
L
never know what doors are going to open. So Chad, thanks so much for being on today, my man.
let's go, looking good. You notice I had to pull out my jacket from, Fine Line here because I knew you're gonna be popping. You're always looking amazing, so this was no dress down, podcast, let me tell you.
No, sir. Hey, we're looking good today. Yes. Oh, I
Love it.
love it. So, Chad, just kind of starting in your journey, talk a little bit about growing up, talk a little bit about parents' impact on you as a youngster. And I know something that's really important to you is your faith life. So, talk a little bit about, if that was instilled with you as a kid or really when that journey started.
Man, so good. Well, Phil, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I know you and I have had we've had a few of these over lunch, and we're like, "Hey, you should come on the podcast." I'm like, "Heck yeah, it'd be awesome!" And I just love what you're doing. The consistency, getting close to 400 here. Let's go, my guy. I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
consistency compounds, and it's just been so fun. All the guests that you've had, so really appreciate you inviting me, asking me to be a part of this, and just love our friendship and all that you're doing to invest into others. So appreciate you, man.
For sure.
No, so my background, my parents were actually divorced when I was 9 months old. I'm an only child, and as I was growing up, my dad was around for a few years, and he moved to California, so we would stay in contact by phone. He actually did a really good job of being a dad that lived in another state. But as I was growing up, as I got older, fifth, sixth grade, my mom started drinking a lot. There are a lot of times she wasn't even home at night. And, I didn't know if she was alive or dead. And so being an only child, I kind of figured out how to raise myself. And so one of the things, she was always very loving. I always felt really loved.
Yeah.
But I think it affected just a lot of my identity. And
Mm.
it kind of caused me to act out just either getting in fights or being a class clown or just not knowing who I was. And when I was 16, it was the first time that I heard the gospel and I
Mm.
invited Christ into my life. And it really radically transformed my life at an early age of being 16.
Yeah. Now, as a 16-year-old, I think sometimes you hear that and you go, could you even possibly know what you're, signing
Yeah.
up for or what you're committing to? And I think for someone listening today, they say, I don't necessarily know what it all entails. And I think the reality is you don't have to know everything, right?
Yeah.
But you just have to take that first step into it. So
Mhm.
talk a little bit about what compelled you to say, yeah, all right, I want this relationship.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, a friend invited me to church,
Yeah.
and I would have always said I was a Christian. I believed in God. I mean, I didn't have any other faith. We didn't practice. We didn't go to church. I didn't read my Bible. But it was the first time that I heard the gospel that
Yeah.
Jesus lived a perfect life, died on the cross for my sins, and that I actually needed to receive Him into
Mm.
my life as my personal Savior. I'd never heard that before. So when
Yeah.
I actually invited Jesus into my life, asked for forgiveness for my sins, and even as a 16-year-old, I mean, I was sleeping around, I was getting drunk all the time. I mean, I was all about, myself. And so I definitely had a lot of sin to confess.
Mm.
And the Holy Spirit, I didn't realize that's what it was then. Just my whole body kind of went numb. And so I really had an experience. And I think God wanted me to know that, hey, I've come in and I have presence. And over the last 6 months, there was this radical transformation of my life from being really all about me from wanting to serve others. So it's
Yeah.
really, really cool.
Now, it had such a radical impact on your life that you end up deciding for this beginning phase of life, like, hey, maybe this is a career
Mm.
opportunity for me.
Yeah.
So, talk a little about, taking it from not just a belief, but really into something that, hey, I'm so on fire that I actually want to make this, my life's work, my passion here.
Yeah, you bet. Well, one of the big pieces too for me was it was all about mentorship. And so there was one guy, he was a youth pastor there at the church, and he mentored me. I think a lot of times people receive Christ and they don't ever get mentored. So he met with a group of us every week. We'd go to Burger King, we'd open up the Bible, we'd talk about life. And for the next 2 to 3 years, he poured into me. He mentored me. And I realized, not having a father figure in my life, I wanted to be that mentor, that father figure for other young men in their lives that were going through some of the stuff that I went through. And so, man, I felt like God was saying, "This is what I want you to do. I want you to pour into the next generation." And so I went to Bible college and ended up becoming a full time youth pastor. So, and I loved it. It was the greatest job I ever had.
Yeah. Now we'll get to the book here in a little bit, but you're already starting to talk about mentorship and
Mhm.
really having that relationship where felt like, hey, I didn't have the true father figure in my own
Yeah.
life, and this guy was a great role. And now you're stepping into at youth ministry, right? The potential
Mhm.
father figure type role for kids and being able to impact them that way. So talk a bit about that for you in that season, and really, once again maybe subconsciously becoming that mentor that you wish you had to, the next generation.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, his investment into me was critical, and I realized that this is kind of what I want to do with my life, and went into full time ministry, and man, I loved it. And it was all about transferring lives, and I know I didn't get to see it yet. I wanna watch it, but I know you had Jeremy Foster,
Yeah.
on the podcast, and Jeremy and I have become friends, and he's such a great guy, and he says something so powerful, is he talks about vision and values. And so God had given me a vision to build a youth ministry that was gonna reach thousands of kids. And I got so zoned in, so focused on that vision. Little by little, my values started to slip.
Mm,
I wasn't spending time in the word daily. I was doing the things of God, but I wasn't being the man of God that God had called me to be. And little by little, pride started getting in there. I started getting really good at my job. The youth ministry's growing.
yeah.
And I think I lost this moment of what was true focus and clarity that God had for my life.
Yeah. So reflecting on that, I think, anyone can say, yeah, at some point in my career and, my pursuit of my goals and
Mhm,
my visions, yeah, there's been times where I've, wandered away or I've put myself at the center of
mhm,
it. In hindsight, in reflecting on that, what's one or two things that people can do practically
mhm.
to make sure that, they are all of a sudden not the focal point, they keep focused on what's most important.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I mean, I think for me, and I do talk about this a lot. I've for the last probably 20 years, the biggest thing that's been the development for me is I've kind of have this win the morning framework
Mm,
where I try and wake up early, beat the sun up. I have these words of affirmation where I just surrender my life to the Lord, words of gratitude, surrender, Lord, these are your hands, these are your feet. Get in the word, touch the word of God before the Bible. And so I'm
yeah,
getting really good clarity. I try and write every day, writing, whether it's things I'm learning in the Bible or things that are going on in my life and how to get clarity. And then I go and work out. That's my what I call my 5W. My I is inspire somebody inside your family and outside your family before 10 a.m. And
mm,
then the N is what are the needle moving activities that you need to get done and do those with no excuses, no complaining, and live an unoffendable life. So, creating those values and doing that in the morning over the last 20 years has really stayed focused on the values and created the standards that are most important, regardless of what the vision is or the direction or the function or the job that I have, is to keep those aligned. And so winning the morning is what I would say has been a critical component to just seeing success and significance in my life.
amazing. So as the youth ministry is growing and, you're rock and rolling there, for a lot of people, they'd say, "But Phil, you didn't introduce Chad as a youth pastor today." And so, at some point along the journey, the idea of, hey, maybe there is a different avenue, there's something else to pursue comes along. And so, talk about that season of life, because I think for so many people listening, they say, "Well, gosh, I've done this for 15 years. Like that, this is just what I'm supposed to do for forever."
Yeah.
And maybe they've lost enthusiasm, or maybe it's starting to feel a little bit of burnout, and they're excited about something else, but they're nervous to make any type of a significant change. So talk a little bit about that season of life for you.
Yeah. So I'd say there's probably 2 major shifts in seasons. The first one is being in youth ministry, feeling called to do that, loving that, chasing the vision, the values. I didn't have that win the morning framework, and so I allowed pride and selfishness and all these different things start to come in, and even though you're serving God, you're loving God, you're wanting to do the right things,
Yeah.
what I allowed to happen in my life is, with a gal that worked with me, an emotional affair that turned into a one night physical affair. And I share that because, um, you know, that pride, that selfishness allowed me to just be thinking about me, not about
Yeah.
my wife, not about my family, not about my church, not about the calling, not about my God. And I allowed selfishness to kind of derail my whole family. And by the grace of God, my wife decided that moment was not going to define me, was not going to define our family, and was not going to define our God. And so, by the grace of God, she had it in her heart to say, "I'm going to give this knucklehead another chance." And so, it's one thing to get God's grace and mercy and forgiveness, when you're kind of doing the right things and you maybe make some mistakes, but when you
Yeah.
really blow it, you blow it in front of your church of 2, 3,000, your wife, your family, your kids, all those different things. And you get to see God's grace and mercy lived out through your spouse who didn't need to do that. She could have said, "You're done, knucklehead. I'm out." And she would have been justified to do that. And so
Yeah.
that moment was a huge defining part in my life, and so I was kind of forced to go, "Okay, well, what's next?" And
Yeah.
how to build those foundation pieces in my life, which, um, I was fortunate to get an opportunity to be a part of Intuit, a Fortune 500 company. Just went in just low level. "Hey, I'll clean toilets if I need to clean toilets."
Yeah.
Just I was so humbled in going from that pride to humility that really came about adding value and serving others, and that was a critical piece, turning point.
I love it. Now, for you, and just kind of hearing that part of your journey, the grace, forgiveness, right? I think for so many people, your idea of forgiveness is that, 5-year-old interaction with you and, a sibling, or you and a friend, and they say, "Well, now you got to say you're sorry." And you say, "I'm sorry." And you stomp away, right? And it's like, well, you said it there, really maybe doesn't seem like you meant it, or that we're actually sorry about something, but you said it. Talk a little bit about, the the grace and the forgiveness, but also being able to receive it. I
Mm,
think so many people, right, have done something that they wish they didn't do, or they're not
mm,
proud of, and they just continue to walk around with that, lugging it over their shoulder, and it's a constant barrier for them. Whereas, once again, we're gonna get into all the amazing things that have transpired since then,
mm,
and it's like, how did you, one, receive that, but
mm.
two, then how did you and your wife, continue to move on from that?
Yeah, that's really good. And I'd say first and foremost, we had a lot of people praying for us. We went through counseling, went through kind of all those that process piece, and you're right. It was years for me of really like, man, I can't forgive myself. How did I allow this to happen? And I understand. I'm serving God, I'm loving him, I'm trying to do the right things, I'm trying to be a good husband, father, all those different things. Like, how did I let this happen? And so there were years there kind of beating up myself and just not being able to forgive myself. And God really clearly told me, "Yeah, you can't forgive yourself. Only I can forgive you. I'm the
Mm,
one who died on the cross for your sins and your forgiveness." So I think truly believing what I knew the scripture said, but then living it out and truly asking for forgiveness, and then choosing each day to be obedient. there's faith. A lot of people have faith, but they're not being faithful, right?
Mm,
Whether
yep.
it not even in a marriage, but in their daily disciplines, the daily things that God's calling them to do, and then really, receiving the forgiveness, because you can't do it. Because if I would do all these things to get the forgiveness, all of a sudden I'm not receiving the forgiveness. I'm doing it, and then that's where our identity gets so messed up. Like, my identity was in being a pastor and
Yeah.
doing what God had called me to do. And then all of a sudden you're not a pastor. Well, what's your identity? Well, my identity is in Christ. I'm a new
Yeah.
creation. The old is gone, the new has come. I've been forgiven. I'm redeemed. I'm a child of God. I'm adopted into his sonship. All those things are realizing who I am is a child of God. And for me, that was a critical piece. For someone I would say that doesn't have faith, it's just being faithful in the little things, getting up, being honest, being open. My phone was always available to my wife, all those different
Yeah.
things. Do the hard things to build trust. And that was a big piece of kind of moving forward.
Now, on just that idea of identity, I think so frequently people can hear, gosh, well, for sure, don't wrap your identity in that, right? But you hear something like, "Man, I wrapped up in being a pastor," and you're like, "Well, that's a good thing, right?" Like, I
Well,
mean, what, what
yeah,
what's bad about that? And it's like, well,
yeah,
because anything that we don't always have control over, right, or anything that can be taken away or can move away, that can lead to a spiral. So, for you
yeah.
today, talk a little bit about what your identity is wrapped into, and you hinted at it, but I think maybe it's some of those morning affirmations and, what you're doing there to just solidify that every
Mm.
single day and, remind yourself.
Yeah, it is good. I mean, Bible tells us the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, right? He wants to
Mhm.
he wants to he wants to take our joy, our purpose, our vision, the direction. God wants what's best for our lives. And for us, the enemy wants to keep us away from God's best, right? So yeah, those habits are critical pieces. Being surrounded by the right people, I think that was critical too, as for my wife and I, we moved. We came back to Omaha. We got surrounded by the right people, which I just really believe the rooms that you put yourself in, the people you surround yourself in, is a big difference. And then moving back here again, I had a mentor who was in ministry that had gone through the same thing, and he had invested and poured into me and walked through those early years of restoration, right? And even going into the business world, one of the things that has always, how do I help the company that I'm working with be prosperous and successful? That was a
Mm,
big piece. And then Colossians 3:23, in all that I do, work at it with all your heart as if you're working for the Lord and not for men. So as I
mm.
started getting into the business world and leveraging the leadership of who I am is really about serving the Lord, adding value to others, and it not being about me. My identity is in Christ. And so I'd say those components are really critical in kind of aligning me for success that would ultimately, turn into significance.
Yeah. So you talked about the move back to Omaha, and as you get to Omaha, a relationship that you have, a friendship, turns into a business opportunity. So talk a little bit about the progression now of, all right, I've moved on from the pastoral world, and I'm moving into more of the business side of things.
Yeah, yeah, a big part of it was it's very interesting. This is why I love so much about personal growth and development in leadership, because if
Yeah.
you're growing in leadership in personal growth, regardless of what job or role you're in, those principles they apply. And we talk about leading different, right? And the way you lead different is by adding value to others and serving them. And so making that transition into the business world was just about, how do I learn? How do I grow? How do I ask really good questions? I think one of the most powerful things too is where you talk about, how do you create growth and kind of go from maybe bottom level up to a high level um, opportunity in the business. And one, it's about being the vision carrier in the room when the visionary isn't there, right?
Yeah.
So what is the vision? What's the vision of the company? What's the vision of the CEO? And for you to be that vision carrier, and if you get really good at that, you're gonna have success because now you're adding value, you're serving others, and you don't compete, you complement. How do
Yeah.
I complement the people around me? How do I add value to them? How do I play to my strengths, figure out their strengths, and not compete? When you're
Yeah.
competing with one another, you're not a team. And you know this, you've coached so much and been a part of great teams and so much kind of cool things in your life of being around some amazing coaches. It's about being a team.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to your point, if you want to be able to do some of those things, the ego's got to go, right? Because
Mhm.
when you live in the, as Simon Sinek says, the infinite world versus the finite world, right?
Mhm.
And that was my whole background. There was a winner and there was a loser. It turns
Yep.
out two people cannot start at point guard on a basketball team.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's only one starting point guard on the basketball team, but yet there's 10 people that might play in a game. And
Yep.
so, something that younger Phil wishes he knew that would have made him a better teammate is, hey, the second most important thing is if you start or not. The first most important thing is what does my team need from me tonight? And
Mhm.
then doing that first. So
Yeah.
as you're, moving into the business world and really, embracing this mindset, I mean, like you said, hey, if you need me to clean a toilet, like, yeah, I can
Yeah.
clean a toilet. Turns out I've done that before.
Yeah.
How do you strategically you know, start to cultivate that within others because I think that's the key to, big growth, right? Is when people start buying into the mission and everyone's on board, you see the change. If one person's there, that can be helpful, but really it's, big changes or big growth happens when everyone's changing and kind of in that
Mhm.
same alignment.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, you hit on a big part of it, right? Humility, and humility is also of understanding what are your strengths.
Yeah.
Right? What are your weaknesses? I've got a framework that I call my KBCDs of leadership. The K is you got to know people's strengths, their weaknesses, their levers, the triggers that you need to pull to help them
Yeah.
to be their best. So part of that humility is what are you really good at? Here's what I'm good at. Here's what I'm not good at. Here's what you're
Yeah.
good at. And when everyone's talking about what are you good at, what are you not good at, and you're being open and honest and authentic, now that's building the team, right? So you got to know yourself, you got to know the other people. And then
Yep.
the B is belong. People want to belong to something
Mm.
bigger than themselves, right? And belonging comes with belief, one, that you believe in them. And a
Mm.
lot of times people don't believe in themselves, but it's borrowed belief, right? How do you give them borrowed belief? And how do you say, hey, I see something great in you. There's something really, I see this strength in you. I see that you're naturally gifted in this. How do we help you become great at that? You got to believe in people. And as you believe in
Yeah.
people, they're going to believe in others. And then you got to care for them, right? You
Yep.
believe in them, you care for them, you pay them well, you promote them properly. But then the real C is so it's they're known, they belong. The other C is that you got to challenge them towards execution. I think there's a lot of teams that kumbaya, oh, whatever, but no, you got to challenge one another. You got to push one another. And when there's trust and authenticity, then you can really push one another and challenge each other to be your best selves. And then the D is develop. Always developing one another, always growing, personal growth and development. I think that's a miss that a lot of companies miss. They do all
Yeah.
this corporate development, but they don't talk about personal growth and development. Because at the end of the day, if I'm a better husband, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, cousin, whatever it is, friend, I'm going to be a better employee because I'm
Yep.
taking care of I'm doing the things that I need to do to come into work to be my best. And so that's kind of a framework that I've always used in leadership and mentorship to build really good teams, build trust, build authenticity. And we've leveraged that a lot. Sojern, we grew from 5 employees to over 600. We had 14 offices worldwide, and in 2025 we sold the company for $250 million. And so, building that up over those 15 plus years of building great teams, building culture, investing in one another, and the growth just starts to happen when you allow people to play to their strengths.
I love it. So yes, let's talk about Sojourn. So you come in, you're in the grassroots, right, the ground floor
Yeah.
of the company, and to your point, you go from 5 to 600 over some time. So what we all know is that at different points, there are different elements of, it's tough to grow. And when you
Mm,
grow and expand, things have to change and you have to be adaptable and you have to redo, the way you had been doing things. What got you here won't always get you there. Right. So talk a little about, that growth for you guys and maybe one or two inflection points in the business where you're like, yeah, this decision ended up leading to great growth, or man, this decision, had we done it again, maybe we would not have done it that way and we could
yeah.
have been there in 12 years instead of 15 years.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I mean, I think when you're pouring in and you're investing into people, there was a time as we got to 50, 100 employees, we had to bring in experts from the outside. In the beginning, everyone's a generalist, right?
Yeah.
And you got to be willing to do whatever, help here, grow here, you develop one another. And then again, you see the gifts of people. And there were a lot of people in the early days, let's say out of that first 20 or 30 people, a lot of them stayed on and ran divisions for us. So that was really cool. So we built a lot of people from within, built this really good culture. I think a critical piece that we did at Sojourn too is that we gave everyone ownership in the company. They had options for ownership in the company. And so if you want people to act like an owner, give them ownership. Give them
Yeah,
ownership
right.
roles, jobs, or actually give them ownership, right? And so if you want people to act like an owner, and so because we had that in place, it gave us a head start on that, right? So I think developing the people from within was critical. The other critical piece is going out and hiring the experts. We
Yeah.
had to hire experts and put them in places because we didn't have it. So we had to reach out and so I think those were some of the critical pieces we had internal. I mean, people will say this today at Sojourn. It's been around for 15 years and during COVID, we went from 600 to 300. We had to lay 300 people off. We were mainly in the travel space. And so obviously travel completely stopped. And we had just taken on $110 million from a growth equity firm. So,
Yeah.
they culture isn't all that important for growth equity. They're
Okay.
there to get you sold or to take you public. It's a numbers game. And we realized at that time it was no longer our company. Um, so, I probably would have done things differently on when you bring in the growth equity firm.
Yeah.
There were probably some times we probably expanded internationally quicker than we could have or should have. We probably could have built $100 million business easy just in the US, but we expanded internationally, which probably delayed some of our growth from that perspective. But it was a little bit of, well, you're an international company now. You're not just a US based company, but most of
Yep.
our revenue and growth was in the US. So I probably would have kept us in the US longer and not we probably expanded too soon internationally. That probably would have helped us get there a little bit quicker.
Yeah. Now, on the exit side of a business, I think for people listening on the outside, they go, "Man, that must be amazing!" Like there you go. You just got this great payday. Like now Chad can go do whatever the heck he wants. But I
Mhm.
think the other part is, this is a second chapter for you, right? It's another potential opportunity to tie an identity into something, right? And
Mhm.
it's now, man, I'm not waking up and going and doing that tomorrow, and
Yeah,
I'm not Chad, part co-founder of Sojern, right? It's like that
yeah,
that is no longer, an identity. So the second time around, right? We had
yeah.
originally said, "Hey, I had some identity in the, title of youth pastor." After the sale, did you feel like there was, even having had that previous experience, any part of you that had some identity tied to, the Sojourn name and, in that title there?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And what's been fun about my journey is being early on and there were a lot of moments that I was invited to, move to San Francisco when, we brought in a new CEO 4 years, and he wanted to move me and some others out to San Francisco. It just wasn't right for my family, so I said no. There was an opportunity to open up the London office, and I said no because it wasn't right for my family. And so, there were some decisions that I made along the way to do the right thing,
Yes.
for my family, what I felt like was best. And so, my identity wasn't in the role, it was in the who I am as a child of God,
Yeah.
how I'm gonna love my wife as Christ loved the church. I'm gonna make the right decisions for my family. So because of that, and some of it was based upon me just not knowing when there was time to go. When you start a company, there's this initial founder type of shares or stock that you
Yeah.
have the opportunity to. And then, if you're playing your cards right, you're getting more stock and options all the way along. Well, I didn't understand how to play my cards right. There were years that I just didn't even realize I should go ask for more stock options.
Yeah.
And I would have got them. There were years that we only had so many we could distribute. So I wanted to distribute them to my team. And so the reality is when we sold the company, a lot of people would think, well, you were a part of this thing from the very beginning. You sold it for $250 million. You must never have to work again. That's not the case. Because of that, one, we distributed a lot of that money around. We also raised about 160 million. So you look at
Yeah.
that. We had, a lot of employees that we distributed, and really, I just didn't know what I didn't know. And
Yeah.
so now I walked away with a good chunk of change, and we were able to reinvest that and do some things and some lifestyle stuff, send some kids to college, very blessed, very grateful and thankful for that. But I really did have to reinvent myself. And in that 2020, when we let go of 300 of those 600 employees, I
Yeah.
stepped out at that time. So that also probably missed out on probably $10 million of a payday, right? Potentially.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting how those things work out. But what's great is that when you're like, Lord, my life is your life. For
Yes.
whatever reason, at this moment of time, $10 million, God was like, nope, I'm not going to give you 10 million. I'm not sure what you're going to do with it. I'm going to keep you hungry and keep you grinding. So I think it's
Mm.
very interesting how when the Lord decides to give us what he wants to give us, to make sure that we stay hungry for what we're doing. And he also wants us to learn, right?
Yeah.
You can still be in God's favor and maybe not get all the things that you're expecting to get from the Lord because he's still refining you. He's still working on you. He's still preparing you. But I do believe when we're faithful with little, we're going to be rewarded with much, and what we reap, we sow. And so I think the Lord now is bringing me into kind of the reaping season of the last 20 years of sowing, from what happened 20 plus years ago of being a youth pastor and kind of derailing my life. Right. So
Yeah.
it's just fun to see what God's doing. And you just go, all right, Lord, my life is your life.
I love it. Now, as 2020 comes to an end and we go ahead and we're looking at the, you know, next phase of things, a unique opportunity with a friend of ours, Mike, starts to we'll just say, unfold, right?
Yeah.
And there's this idea of, hey, I should maybe have a, conference where people can grow and get better and have some personal growth and development. And you and Mike really partner up in this, lead different idea. So talk a little bit about, the events you've thrown and now the coaching mastermind that you guys have put together.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. Well, kind of after that 2020, you're right. It was a readjustment of, all right, where do I go? What do I do? I actually got involved in some real estate. We bought the old
Yeah.
Ralston granary down there with a group of folks, and we started a venture capital fund and just really pouring back into local businesses. Started working for a UK based company for the last 4 years, helped them expand here in the US. And then a couple years ago, really, Mike O'Connell had the vision. God had put him in a lot of great rooms with John Maxwell and Ryan Leake and Jordan Montgomery and some really dynamic communicators, speakers, leaders, John Gordon. And he just was going to all these conferences all over and really felt that God was saying, you need to bring this to Omaha. How do
Mm,
we help leaders get better in Omaha so they don't have to fly to Florida or California and they can bring their teams? And so really he had this vision of lead different experience, which was a leadership event. He brought the very first one, John Gordon and Jordan Montgomery, out to that event, which you and I know Jordan. That's where I got to meet Jordan. You've been coached by Jordan Montgomery for years. Amazing guy. First time I met him was actually 2 years ago, almost 3 years now, when we did the lead different experience. And
yeah.
so Mike had the vision. I said, "Hey, I believe in it. I'll come support you." Right? How do you cast the vision? So I took the vision that Mike had and just really started to cast that out. And in between the two of us and our network, we saw close to 300 leaders at the first Lead Different experience. Year one, that was over 2.5 years ago. And then last year, about the same. We did about 300. And this year, Mike and I, we heard a lot from the folks that were there. How do we want more? We don't just want this once a year. We want
Yeah.
to be surrounded in community on a weekly basis, so, or on a monthly basis. And so we launched a coaching group called Lead Different Legacy Beyond, and got almost 30 people in that coaching group. And we meet twice a month, and we're doing life together and just pouring into them from a faith driven perspective with their families, their businesses. It's really kind of entrepreneurs, high level executives, CEOs, that we're just kind of pouring into. And we've built this really cool coaching community, and we're excited to see what God's going to do with that. And we'll have the Lead Different live event again October 9th. That's going to be awesome. And then we've been doing some of these masterminds as well. We're going to do a few of those throughout the year. So we're doing that and just seeing what God's going to do with it. It's pretty awesome.
Now, the lead different, I think everyone's mind goes to maybe a different spot when they hear lead differently.
Mhm.
Maybe they think of, ooh, I had this leader one time, or I had this coach, I had this mentor, and it was just not a good
Yeah.
experience. I want to lead differently than that. But when you guys say lead different, what are you articulating to the individual, to the audience? What are you doing differently?
Yeah. Well, I think what's really great, I mean, we truly believe that Jesus Christ is the best leader that ever walked the face of the earth. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy was here for 33 years. He had 3 years of public ministry. And, it'd be hard for anyone to argue that Jesus Christ hasn't had more impact than any other leader. And he never held a title. He didn't run for office. He didn't, you know what I mean? He literally mentored, discipled, invested in a few who took his message out to the whole entire world 2,000 years later, and it's still impacting. So, a big part of leading different and the way Jesus led different was by being a servant, by
Ugh.
serving others. We talk about being a ladder holder. Were you the difference in significance of your life when you stop chasing, climbing the ladder, and you decide that you're going to be a ladder holder for
Yeah.
those around you? That's what lead different is all about, is adding value to others, serving those around you, being the ladder holder for other people to lead and achieve and to leave a legacy that lasts beyond this earth, right? So when
Yeah.
we talk about lead different, it's about leading the way Jesus led, and he led by serving and giving his life as a servant.
Amazing. So to get to your book and talking about that, we've heard a few different times in our conversation today, mentorship and different mentors that have had a huge impact on your life. And so you say, all right, I feel like, I've had mentors. I want to be a mentor to others. What better way? I can't mentor every single person, so maybe I need to put some of these ideas into a book. So talk
Yeah.
a little about, the original thought of the book, and then, we can't give away all the good nuggets today, but we'll maybe give one or two good nuggets away about mentorship and really, something that you'd encourage others to take away from your book.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So good. No, for me, my boys are 26 and 25 right now. I've been writing the book for the last couple years, kind of doing it on nights and weekends, and now it's done. We're just kind of doing the alignment, but part of it came up with one, it's a little bit about my story from wreckage to restoration, hopefully to inspire people who feel like their life is over. They've disappointed every single person in their life. They've disappointed God. They've disappointed, a spouse, someone close to them. They've just kind of ruined their life and kind of how God can restore it, right? So there's part of that, but the other piece is I'm mentoring my young kids who are adults, mentoring a
Yeah.
lot of different kids and doing lunch, and I call them kids, guys in their 20s, mid
Yeah.
20s. And I was like, I really want a framework for this. What are the most important things that I want them to know? Not just random doing life, which is great. And
Yeah.
that's mentorship, is about doing life together. But what
Yep.
are some of the important things I want them to know? So I really created this blueprint, and that's the focus growth framework. So the book is really this blueprint. And I think there's a lot of people who would be willing to mentor, but they don't have a framework for it. So
Yeah.
this book is really designed where you can read it, you and your mentor read it together, and then there's questions. Chapter 3 through 10 is, you go through the focus growth framework and you really talk about mentorship and do life together. So my heart is that maybe it will inspire a lot of men who are sitting on the sidelines. Women are a lot better at mentorship than men. So a lot of men who maybe have had success in their life, but
Yeah.
they really need to pour into the next generation. I love John Maxwell, right? He says, you know, um, leadership is everything rises and falls on leadership.
Yeah.
And I really believe the next generation rises and falls on mentorship. And
Yeah.
so my heart, my vision is God gave me this vision of reaching 7 million men by 2030 to become
Mm.
mentors, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about that vision. But what I'm most excited about the vision is each day living out the values that God has called me to do, to win the morning, to kind of invest into not only my relationship with Him, but to invest into others. So the book's a little bit about my story in that framework of how you can become the mentor you wish you had.
Now, when you think of mentorship and, impacting that next generation, I think some people might say, "Oh gosh, I'm just so disconnected." It's so much
Mhm.
different now than it was when I was in my 20s, or whatever, or 30s, wherever that, gap is. And at the same token, the more things change, oftentimes the more they stay the same, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it looks different today, right? Hey, maybe you're making phone calls on a payphone and they're making phone calls, on a cell phone with wireless headphones. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of similarities. There's probably more
Yeah.
similarities
Yeah.
than there are differences. And
Mhm.
so, how do you help, that generation or, someone that's 10, 20 years older, feel like they're truly connecting with the, younger generation or that next generation of leader?
Yeah. No, that's really good. Well, first and foremost, it starts off with just a willingness to want to pour into the next generation,
Yeah.
and the belief that you have something to add, and
Mhm.
everyone has value to give, and they've got a
Yeah.
story to tell. And mentorship is just about walking along. It's not coaching. You're
Yep.
not giving people goals and all these, but you're walking, you're doing life together. And the framework does help them talk about their faith or the outcomes or core values, what's your unique calling in this season. There's some of that process in there. So it gives them the framework to be able to have that. But the reality is this generation has more content and information than any other generation of all time, and they're the most lonely, depressed kind of generation because of the lack of connection. Now we're
Yeah.
seeing this movement. I feel like there's a movement of young people that are connecting to their faith. They're connecting with one another, and you're starting to see this kind of change there. But most people want to just be in relationship where someone doesn't want anything from them. They just
Yeah.
wanna give to them and add value to them. And I think one of the things about being a really good mentor, like someone who's being mentored, is ask a lot of questions. So I talk a little bit about how to be a good mentor in the book as well. Not only a mentor, but a mentee, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think part of it is just giving them that belief to go pour in and invest into other people, because relationships are critical. We need to be surrounded, and it's just important that we pour into the next generation. And as you think about AI and technology and how that can even make us get all of our knowledge from the computer or, this kind of, the importance of relationships are more important than ever before.
I love it. Now, kind of lastly, on that idea of mentorship and being the mentor that, you wish you had, I think something that probably hits near and dear to you, and it's fun for me to see from a distance, is that dad role, right?
Mm,
It's a very important mentor. It's not, you and I going and grabbing lunch together. It's, hey, you are my physical child. So
yeah,
talk a little bit about, how you've kind of formulated that dad role, and to your credit, you said, "Hey, my dad was a good dad from a distance, right? I mean, you
yeah.
do what you can, at that time frame, being in a different state, but it's different, and you've really approached it differently." So, talk a bit about your mentorship as a father to your kids.
Yeah, no, it's pretty awesome. Well, my oldest boys they're 26 and 25. I've got 4, 2 boys, 2 girls. And the oldest ones, we meet every other Friday. We go through a coaching call. And so part of that is and we truly are doing coaching and we're doing mentorship life together. But a big part of for me is just being a person of character, being a person of integrity, building consistency. And so your kids see that, and your kids get to see everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. And so a big part of that is, I think, the best mentors, the best parents, they're, we hit on that humility piece, right? You got to say, hey, I'm sorry. I was short. I raised my voice. I screwed up there. Will you please forgive me? And you're modeling grace and mercy and forgiveness and helping them see that you're not perfect. And I think that's a big piece of mentorship is just being authentic and being real. I mean, people they see when you're being fake and just being honest with your kind of your struggles and how to get better. I think that's a big piece of it.
Amazing. Well, Chad, I want to say thanks for being on today. And yes, for listeners, go grab yourself a copy of Focus Growth, Become the Mentor You Wish You Had. Chad, thanks so much for being on, and excited to do this again in probably 3 or 4 years. Book number 2 will be out. You'll probably be at, well, let's see, 3 or 4 years. Yeah, you'll be at 7 million people impacted, and we'll be focused on the next 7.
Let's go. Let's go. Praise the Lord. Hopefully, all for his glory, man. Appreciate you, Phil. Thanks so much for the time. It's really great being a part of this. Love having you in my life. Man, you're the real deal. Anyone who doesn't get to spend time with Phil and you only watch him on these this is who he is. He's joy, he's an encourager. You go have lunch with him, you see him, in the halls at church. He is who he is, and just grateful and thankful for you, man. Appreciate you, and just gonna continue to pray God's favor and blessing on your life, brother. Good things to come. Let's go.
My man.